What happened was after that is probably one of the bizarrest revolutions the planet had ever seen. 950 people were randomly chosen out of the entire population of Iceland to help draft a new constitution for their country.
New beginnings, like you mentioned earlier, it's a zero, and so that is infinite possibilities. Risk taking, freedom. Uranus is the planet of rebellion, and in a sense, the Fool is a little rebellious because, as you just mentioned, his mom's taking the picture, but he's leaving. He's going out, on an adventure. It's the beginning.
I just remember that song by Prince that said, "Let's go crazy."
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's another good one.
The rhythm and the pumping and the music is like,
Yeah.
and the guitar, it kind of shakes up the norm.
It's also like that feeling you get when you go to a new country for the first time. When in the first day that you're there, you have a sense of the place that you will never have again. Because once it becomes a normal thing, you've moved beyond that 0 point. Once it then becomes normal, your senses get used to it, and it's an entirely different sensation.
Hello and welcome to the final study group for modern astrology in 2024. Today we're going to take a look at Uranus. We're going to investigate and unlock the energy of the strangest planet of the zodiac, and we're going to gain some insight into how this planet influences us at an individual level and also as a collective, as a species here on Earth. We're going to look at the mythology and the expression of this planet. We're going to explore it through the context of the modern world. We'll also take a look, like we always do, at the tarot cards associated with Uranus. And then we're going to look at how to incorporate Uranus into your astrology readings. So we're going to go through quite a lot today. It's so far, every time I've done one of these planet workshops, I've had a lot of insights and I've discovered a lot of things that, I had not encountered before, or I learned to look at planets in different ways to the ways that I've looked before. But I think out of all the planets we've looked at so far, Uranus for me has been the most interesting. It's been a very, very interesting ride. So I'm looking forward to going through all this content with everybody today. Look, if you enjoy our content and want to know more, then please remember to like and subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. We've got big plans for 2025. We've been meeting like mad people in the last couple of months, so we're ready to kick off in the new year. You're invited. So I'm just putting that out there as well. Remember to click that button and be a part of what we're doing in the new year ahead. My name's Damien McKinnon. I'm an Aquarius Sun, a Leo Moon, and a Taurus Ascendant.
I'm Michael Pruitt. I'm an Aquarius Sun, a Libra Moon, and a Libra Ascendant.
Hi, I'm Sandra Walker. I'm a Leo Moon, a Leo Sun, and a Gemini Rising.
I'm Antoinette. I'm a Pisces Sun, Cancer Moon, Scorpio Rising.
I'm Rowan. I'm a Leo Sun, Aquarius Rising, and Taurus Moon.
Thanks, everybody. All right, let's kick off. Let's just go down and have a look at what we're going to go through today. Normally we start with mythology, but this is probably one of the first real revelations for me when looking at Uranus. We're going to start with pots and pans. We're going to have a look at Iceland back in the 90s, right up to around the middle of the 2000s. This will give us a good read on how to interpret and work with Uranus as a planet. And then we're going to return to the mythology after that. We'll take a look at Uranus as a planet. We're going to look at Uranus like we always do in the context of the modern world. We're going to look at it in the tarot context as well, the tarot cards that are connected to Uranus. We're going to look at how to work with Uranus in a sign and also in a house, like we always do. We'll take a look into the aspects, both easy and hard. And we'll look at ways of working directly with Uranus energy too, how to manifest it in your life, how to get more Uranus. So that's on the menu for today. Getting back to Iceland, what happened was we had business as usual probably for the next couple of years. The government just kind of learned to eke out a life, in what had now become probably modern day Greece in a lot of ways. Greece is going through a lot of this right now. Their policies didn't change much. They still continue to live in a comfortable way funded by taxpayers and things like that. the Icelandic people were getting pretty pissed off about this. So what happened was they started gathering outside Parliament in small groups, holding pots and pans. They had whistles in their mouths. Every time a politician went into Parliament or came out, they started blowing these whistles and banging their pots and pans at them. You know what I mean? And it probably seemed ridiculous when it first started, you know, and these politicians are looking at these guys thinking, what the hell's going on here? They'll get tired of this and they'll go home. 3 months later, this group gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And suddenly an incredible amount of people are standing outside Parliament. Every time these politicians turn up, bang, 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 whistle, 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 they start harassing them and it's getting louder and they can see the writing on the wall. This number is getting bigger and bigger and bigger all the time. Not once did they ever resort to violence, physical violence. It was a form of political harassment every time they came in and they came out. And this started to have effect on the morale of the government. Around, what was it? I think around February, March 2008, the government collapsed. They all walked out. They all walked out at the same time, all got into their cars and they drove away and never came back again. And what happened was after that is probably one of the bizarrest revolutions the planet had ever seen. 950 people were randomly chosen out of the entire population of Iceland to help draft a new constitution for their country. You could have been a street cleaner, you could have been unemployed, you could have been a teacher, you could have been a stripper, you could have been, you know, and hey, you know, when you've got all these investors coming in, it's a great time to be a stripper. But they randomly chose 950 people to come in and rewrite the constitution of their country. Now, what they wrote into their constitution was the public ownership of assets. So no country could come in or company could come in and take control of their assets or get enough of a shareholder over their assets that they no longer had control of them anymore, which meant that they had absolute transparency about how their assets were being used. That's natural resources, that's economic resources, all of that sort of stuff. They decided that everybody had equal rights to education and healthcare. So it didn't matter what level of the population you were, or, you know, we were social demographic level, you had the same access to a hospital or to a school that a rich family did. And, you know, they were very, very clear about it. They wanted greater transparency on the way that everything was done, and they wanted direct democracy. They wanted it didn't matter what government was in. If they decided to pass a law, normally in a country, you know, you'll have the opposition and the party that's in power. The party in power will propose a law. The opposition, if they've got enough people, will push back. They'll go through a process and it'll get drafted. Even if that happens, the public basically have a level of control to override that. If the public don't like it, they'll vote, and that law is basically thrown out. So the government does not have absolute control on the situation like they did before. Now, within this group of 950, they chose 25 people to sit down and draft their constitution. And that basically has set them up to the country that they've become now. A lot of the companies that had gone in there and had been exploiting their economy, exploiting the conditions, they started trying. A lot of these companies fled because they knew their heads were on the chopping block for this. And financially, they would be dragged into court and they'd be sued by the Icelandic people. A funny thing happens too, even little things like if you get a speeding ticket, then how much you have to pay is directly proportional to your income. And this starts to make a lot more sense because I was always aware of the god Uranus, and you know the description for Uranus in astrology and the profile for Uranus in mythology never matched up. Uranus is a primordial. He is one of the first gods. His children are the Titans, and the Titans are the parents of the gods. Uranus and Gaia were two of the first beings that ever basically existed in the Greek and the Roman pantheons. Now, Uranus was a tyrant. He is the first tyrant, basically. He had children. Those children were the Titans, and he ruled over them with absolute control. and dominance and things like that. He had heard a prophecy that his children were going to overthrow him. So he started locking them away, like any good father does. And these children rebelled with the help of their mother Gaia, who basically overthrew him. They castrated him. For some reason, that seemed important. I guess they didn't want any more kids coming from him. And then they took over his universe, and they became the big thing for the next little millennia till Zeus came along and his cadre of gods, and they overthrew them as well. Now, when we talk about Uranus in the astrological context, we always talk about the planet in the context of revolution and chaos. The god himself had absolutely nothing to do with revolution and chaos. In fact, he was the very embodiment of strict control. What that tells us is the whole expression of the planet Uranus is not about the god, but it's about the downfall. It's about the toppling and the destruction of power, whether it's done violently, whether it's done non-violently. And what that tells us about that whole pots and pans revolution that happened, Uranus wasn't the lead up, not the whole be all and end all of it. And it wasn't, the new reforms and the constitution and all that got written after. The moment that Uranus would have gone direct in this entire process would have been the moment when that last politician left the building, when those people were all standing outside wondering what the hell to do next. And then the first person started walking towards Parliament. Now, those guards who were standing at the door, who had been stopping people from going into that Parliament for months, suddenly stood aside and let this person walk into the building for the first time. And for a moment, not a single person knew what was going to happen next. Nobody knew there was going to be a referendum. Nobody knew that 950 people would be drawn in randomly. These are all things that started happening. So what we see is Uranus applying. When that first person stood outside Parliament with pots and pans and a whistle, started banging, then other people saw this and thought, hey, wow, that's a good idea. Let's do that. And they started gathering around. That was Uranus applying, starting to build up momentum, and starting to grow and grow and grow until that collapse happened. And then the government left the building. They just thought, God damn it, we're done. There's nothing we can do about this. They were baffled. And they all packed their suitcases and emptied their drawers and put all their stuff in a box and walked out the door. Those guards standing at the door wouldn't have expected it. You know what I mean? They wouldn't have been told. And all of a sudden, they're all getting into their limousines and their cars and their, whatever they arrived in, and they left the building. And that moment right then was the zero moment. The zero moment is when all possibilities are on the table. They say that choice is the death of all other possibilities. And that hasn't happened yet. But the moment just before that happens, that's the 0 point. That's when this can go in any direction. Anything can happen after this. All options are available. And that's the Uranus moment right there. When the new constitution started to be drafted and all of that sort of stuff, that happened after the point, and it could only happen because of that 0 point. Suddenly, all these options start creating themselves, and the more entrenched and the more solidified they become, the more we're separating from Uranus, and we're going back to a new kind of business as usual.
When I was doing some research, I did find that it said a day on Uranus lasts for 17 hours, and the night lasts for 42 years.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow. The night.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't that reinforce that 0 point though? That day is just a flicker in everything that happens. You know what I mean? If you're going to go to the post office, you better do it quick. 'Cause,
Yeah, and it corresponds to the Uranus opposition at 40 something.
Yeah.
So it's like either we've had, half our life in the day, and then here comes the night.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Okay.
I wonder, just a random thought that's coming to me. It's like that as you talked about that 0 point and that everything is possible, and it's almost like this continuous opportunity to bring something revolutionary into the world, and if you don't toe the line in regards to, like, if you try and hold on, if you try and restrict, if you try and control, then it's going to go against you. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
When you're in,
The more you try and exert control,
and
the faster you lose your connection with that zero moment. You pollute it, basically.
yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely
And so
right.
then the Titans were created, and they had that same opportunity. So they overthrew him to try and bring back that equilibrium, and then they went that way as well. And so then they had, you know, and it's sort of that cycle of, yeah, it's that cycle of control and freedom, I guess.
Blossom and decay.
Control and 0 point, control and
Yeah.
the possibility, the infinite
Saturn,
possibility.
Uranus.
What
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Blossom and decay. You know, we see the cycle of rise and fall. Read this really interesting interview with a futurist, somebody who his whole job is basically to predict trends before they happen and stuff like this. And he said one of the things he's done all his life is he lives near the ocean, and every day he'll go down and he'll look at the ocean and he'll look for patterns. I mean, you'll see the same patterns happening again, the waves rising and falling and things like that, but the way, you know, all the ripples go, the way all the currents go appears completely random. But he said, you watch it long enough, you'll see the patterns. You'll see the way that it all works and things like that. And even then, it's the perfect marriage of chaos and order. And I think that's when everything's working just at that moment. I think that's the opposite pole of Uranus, when you've got that right blend of chaos and that right blend of order. And it's like a razor's edge, and we ride it for a while until we inevitably fall over the other side. And then there's more order than chaos, you know, and then we start to descend into that. So again, it's like a slingshot orbit that's going between these two opposites. And that's the human cycle of consciousness. Like they say, you know, this futurist said, if you look at it as it is right now, it's stochastic. It seems too big to be able to predict what's going to happen next. But you watch it long enough, you'll start to see the patterns. You'll start to see the nuances and the subtleties of what's going on. You've just got to watch it for a long time with an open mind and be willing, you know what I mean, without bias and things like that. Yeah, so I absolutely, I think you've really captured the spirit of it there, Sandra. I think the more you try and hold on to it, the faster it leaves. You know what I mean? It's like love. The more you analyze it, the quicker it leaves the room. You know what I mean? Exactly the same thing. It's bigger than you are, you know, and that's why Uranus expresses too. You know, it's not just for you. Yeah. In fact, we seem to be the furthest away from Uranus and the closest to being struck by it when individuals start to hold on too tight. You know what I mean? So Uranus in the modern world, one of the most obvious manifestations of that is the digital revolution. And this has become a juggernaut and a monster that's growing faster than anybody's ever expected it to. I remember when I was in the IT industry around 2000 watching, I was in the corporate training industry at the time, and the amount of training we wrote within a matter of months as people prepared for Y2K and all that fear. You know, Y2K itself had become an expected 0 point. Anybody remember that? You know, all these theories that were coming around about what was going to happen and all of this sort of stuff. You know, anybody?
It's going to be like a reboot.
A reboot. That's what was. Anybody standing next to an ATM just before? There was a lot of paranoia. You wouldn't be able to get your money out.
I can't even remember.
We did stay home. We did stay home that New Year's. We did not go out. We did stay home just in case.
Yeah. Of course you did it. Any smart person, but we did go out actually. We were in the city, but right around probably 10 minutes before to about 5 minutes after, it was deathly quiet in the city. People were just waiting to see what was going to happen. First thing we expected were all the lights to go out for some reason.
The whole grid to go down. Yeah, we were expecting the whole grid to go down.
Are we looting or are we not looting? You know, it's that whole sort of mentality. Oh, we're not looting. Okay, all right. I guess I'll go home. I better get a cab before everybody else does. If they still.
Ever the optimist me, I just went out and celebrated New Year's Eve like it was a normal New Year's Eve. But I think a few months before it, I was speaking to the father of a friend and you know, voicing a few concerns, and he was like, you know, when you get to my age, the end of the world has come about so many times and not happened, you stop worrying about it. And so I was just like, oh, okay, then there's no need to worry about that anymore.
You remember the Mormons predicted the end of the world. When was it? In the 60s? They were all ready for it. They were all ready for the world basically to come apart in some great, some great religious event to happen, which obviously didn't. I think the only thing that happened right then was weed sales, and LSD was still legal, went through the roof. I think Woodstock was probably the closest they got to the apocalypse. But they're still here. They're still here. They're still Mormons, so I don't know.
Yeah, there's lots of Mormons.
Yeah. I think they're doing better than ever, aren't they? Good for them. Power vacuums. That moment I'm talking about after the pots and pans revolution, when the first person walked into Parliament, there was a palpable power vacuum right at that time. Generally, we've seen historically that some of the greatest violence doesn't happen in the lead up to a downfall. It can happen after. We saw it happen with Stalin. We saw it happen with Pol Pot. We see these power vacuums when a ruler is deposed and they go on. We see when the cartel were overthrown in Mexico. They were one big form of power down in Mexico, and all of a sudden we've got all these mini cartels exploding like 7-Elevens in all these different little towns that are a lot more difficult to control, a lot more difficult to work around and things like that, because they're no longer a centralized source. You can't negotiate with them. You can't attack them head on. And that all came because of a power vacuum, because the cartel fell in the form that it was. So, and right again too, at the moment that a power vacuum first exists, then we have 0 point. That's exactly what happens. It's like an atom bomb when it drops, or any bomb. The blast goes out and then it creates a vacuum right at the center, and then it starts to suck everything back in again and then goes straight up into the air as a cloud. And that moment where that vacuum is at its biggest, that's Uranus right there at the center of that explosion. I remember when the internet really started to catch on, there was a lot of fear in power groups that about Julian Assange's, and these WikiLeaks and things like that. Suddenly all this stuff would be dragged out into the light, and it would be destructive. It would threaten these power bases directly. We evolved into something new. Instead, rather than transparency, we just got this atrocity after atrocity come out. And they come out so quickly that you just can't focus on any single one of them anymore. We're in the post-truth age now, as Trump coined the phrase himself, where we're just the most comfortable lie now. That's our truth. That's the one that in a way, it's revealed us, hasn't it? I think. Not just the people in power, but the people around us now. So, and there's Luddites.
So I guess that to some extent speaks to control, people needing to control what they allow in, and social media has had a huge amount to do with the dissolution of conversation, because before social media there was an open space for conversation, and people did to some extent listen. They exchanged ideas, and you're not just exchanging ideas, you're exchanging energy, because you're in a space with a person, and that's a different format. Social media took that space away, and so it was much easier to express an opinion and then just close off to anything else that was coming in, and there is control in this, because why are you not able to at least be open to an alternative opinion to your own? Why do you need to control your environment so tightly that you can't let anybody else's opinions in? And so again, there's the potential there for Uranus to come in and shake that up, and there's the duality aspect of that too. It's like, if you're only going to stick to this idea and you don't want to hear any other, you can't listen to the opposite, and the opposite must be completely untrue. Then, if Uranus is moving us towards this more non-duality space, then there's only so long you can hold on. There's only so long that control can still maintain your identity. And, at some point you're going to reach zero, and you're going to have to enter that unknown space of infinite potential again and see where that takes you.
I think one of the major programming flaws of human consciousness is we've got two directives. One is to be free and one is to be controlled. And we only respond to one when we've got too much of the other. Do you know what I mean? And it's one of the big predeterminants that says as a species we will never be settled, we will never be free, and we will never be controlled. We'll constantly be locked in a cycle of blossom and decay, you know, that everything will rise, everything will fall, and we'll just keep being locked in that cycle all the time. Yeah. And it's good in a way. It's good in a way. Otherwise, we'd stagnate. I have this theory that we only ever have in a lifetime the same problems again and again. We just experience them at a deeper and finer level, you know. If we're getting better at dealing with them, because they keep coming back again and again in many different ways and many different forms. And again, too, we see it on the macro scale. It's either happening with pots and pans or it's happening with guillotines, but it's the same thing. It's the same conditions have created the setup for it and everything that happens. When the first guillotine was created, Uranus, you know, when they built it, nailed all the pieces together and put that rope and that blade on, Uranus was already separating. You know, the premeditation in building that first guillotine signaled that Uranus was already leaving the building, you know, and we were starting to settle into a new regime. And that for me is tremendously exciting, and that throws a whole new spin on the way we work with Uranus in the chart, you know, because it's fickle. It's something that's not there for long. But it'll happen again and again and again. It's cyclic. It'll keep happening in the same house and the same sign, presenting us with the same problems. You know what I mean? Or opportunities, whatever. I get annoyed by those people. Every time I say, you know, oh, I've got a problem with so-and-so, and someone says, oh, wait, you mean an opportunity? And, you know, I'm just like, no, I mean a goddamn problem. So, goddamn optimists. Yeah. I know. But hey, there's a duality in that already, you know what I mean? We're occupying different spaces of the glass at the same time. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, we are. And between us, the glass is full. There we go.
Yeah, indeed.
Looking at the tarot deck. So we've already talked about this guy already, the Fool, right there at the start, you know, of the major arcana journey. He's got his backpack. He's got his sandwiches tucked away in the back there. He's holding a leaf there, a laurel, a branch, and he's good to go, you know. It's probably his mum from the doorstep there with her phone taking that photo as he's stepping up onto the precipice there. Both terribly excited and terribly worried at the same time, you know. So, you know, the Fool. Anybody want to share some thoughts on the Fool and the Uranus connection?
New beginnings, like you mentioned earlier, it's a 0, and so that is infinite possibilities. Risk taking, freedom. Uranus is the planet of rebellion, and in a sense, the Fool is a little rebellious because, as you just mentioned, his mom's taking the picture, but he's leaving. He's going out, you know, on an adventure. It's the beginning, and it's going to be unexpected, and there are going to be surprises, and maybe some pots and pans along the way. You know what I mean? But yes, it is just the card of a new start, and like I said, rebellion is what jumps out at me.
An interesting thing about that card too is just the name. Is he calling himself the Fool, or are other people calling him the Fool for the journey he's about to take? You know?
Other people calling him the Fool, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Because he doesn't feel like a fool.
Yeah.
He's taking a big risk and he wants to, you know, start his life all over again. And it's like you say, it's a big risk, you know.
Yeah.
But
you know,
Yes, he's had to follow his star. I think he's following his North Star or his North Node. And it's very hard to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not easy. So that's how I see the fool. And definitely everybody's going to call him a fool, because he's leaving home. He's starting a new journey. It's a spiritual journey. They're going to say he's crazy. Look at the way he's dressed. Look at, he has no plan. He thinks he's the boss and he has no regard for authority. He's his own authority. He's bound to fail,
Yep.
So he gets a bad rap. I remember when I was learning the fool, there was two sides to the fool. He was either a fool or he was a genius. And usually it's both, You never know who you are unless you go all the way out there.
Yeah.
You have to have faith. You have to trust. You have to believe, and just give it your all. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is like lover's leap. You don't know what you're getting yourself into.
Right, you just jump.
Yeah. Look, one of the greatest bits of advice I got, if you want to learn something completely new, is to dare to be naive, to dare to let go of all your preconceptions and all the knowledge you've got right now, to make room for new thought forms and new ideas and new ways of seeing things like that. And that can be extremely challenging, and it requires an incredible amount of stamina to maintain. Because your brain is conditioned to problem solve everything that it sees. So when you're presented with new information, your brain will already be trying to solve it, or move it too quickly into the true or false basket and things like that. One day in Iceland, one frosty morning, some guy got up, he had his breakfast served by a maid or a chef, put his three-piece suit on, got in his limousine, got out of his car to go to work, and then he looked over and he saw some guy banging a pot and pan and blowing a whistle at him on the side there. And he said, "What is that fool doing?" You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I agree with you. I think the fool is a name that other people give him. To be the fool when everybody else seems to have it figured out and everyone's telling you how to live, how to think, what the status quo is and all of that sort of stuff, requires an incredible amount of strength and stamina. Even the name itself is a misnomer. Yeah.
And I think it also must indicate, someone who is deeply intuitive and willing to follow that intuition, even though, like, as you can see in the card, it's, there's no clear path. It's all foggy. You can't see where he's going or where he'll end up. He's just and like, I love how you brought that pots and pan example in just there, because the first guy who turned up and banged his pot and pan, he had no idea where that would lead. He had no idea that would lead to what it led to. He just knew that he needed to do that thing. And everyone would have thought he was a fool until they thought, oh, maybe I can join in. So it's an instinctual, intuitive thing that is being followed, and that's the hardest thing for most people in this day and age to do.
But it was the pots and pans became universal, because I remember I was living in Argentina and there was the total lockdown of the banks. They call it the Corralito in the times of Antonio de la Rua. And people went out on their balconies, they went out on the streets with the pots and pans, and that was 2001, 2002, about that time. So it sparked something universal, like this is how we are going to protest,
Yeah.
I remember I was out on the balcony with the pots and pans too.
Let me ask, when we were talking about that pots and pans revolution this morning, and you got to the part where the government just packed their shit up and left, what was happening in your head at the time there? Because a lot of people said they'd never heard that before. But did it feel like a part of your brain activated when you heard that moment and things like that? It's almost like a sleeper signal in everybody's head. It was interesting what you said, Sandra, when that first dude's out there banging his pot. And I bet for a good month, those politicians are laughing it up every morning when they got into the office. But there would have been a moment where the laughter stopped and they realized this is serious. But Did it feel like there's like a jolt of electricity in a center of your brain or something like that, like a switch going on when you hear that? It feels like we're all sleeper agents listening for that signal to happen. You know what I mean? And probably the hardest part of the digital revolution right now is that signal's going off all the time in every direction. From liars, from manipulators, from truth tellers, from whistleblowers, from actors, from politicians. That signal's going off all the time to the point that we've stopped paying attention to it now. Maybe that's one of the most horrific casualties of this whole digital revolution. You know what I mean?
But that can also be the thing that brings us back, is that, you get to the realization that there's too much information out there, and I don't want all of that information. And so it brings you back in, and it brings you back to needing to find what's true in here, because there's no longer truth out there, or there's too many truths. And so it brings you back to the Fool that says, okay, well, where's that spark of electricity in me? What feels right and true in me? Because this is no longer giving that to me.
And we
At least
talked
that's
at great length
how I
about
feel
that.
with it a lot of the time.
Yeah, and we talked in great length about that when we talked about Pluto and Aquarius, that exact thing that you're talking about right now. Yeah, so it's happening. I feel like there's a shift that's happening. Yeah.
Well, they're all moving together next year, so they're all
Yeah.
supporting each other in the shift
Yeah.
that's taking place. They're just allowing it to happen piece by piece by piece, so that we don't all get completely overwhelmed by it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. The Tower. Okay, now it's ruled by Mars. But what would the Uranus moment be with the Tower? Everyone's seen the Rider-Waite photo of it. Sorry, I could see you throw your hands up in the air too. I think, again, too, because a lot of the rulers that you've got for the tarot cards are different to the ones I've got and things like that.
No, it's Mars for me also, but there's the Uranian lightning that opens in the right away with the crown falls off. So it's like the seventh chakra opens up, so you get mental illumination.
That's right. In the form of a couple of poor suckers falling off the top of that tower. And the actual Rider-Waite card is almost a snapshot of them halfway from the comfort of their balconies to the death of hitting the bottom of that tower. They're in the air, aren't they? You've got how many little plumes of fire coming out from the tower, all snapshotted. That would have won photo of the year if it had been a photo. I don't know, for whatever snuff movie academy it was. But
Towering Inferno.
Yeah. So, Mars is the violence and the suddenness of it, but the exact moment when that lightning falls and they're in the air, they're halfway between the safety of the tower and the absolute doom of hitting the ground. That's when the photo happens. That's when that moment that the card captures, isn't it?
Right.
The writer William S. Burroughs wrote a book called The Naked Lunch. I don't know if anybody read it. Incredible read. He was, I think, a paranoid schizophrenic heroin addict who traveled around the country, and he would just write. He was convinced there was some sort of almost alien people that were living among us, doing all sorts of things to human people. And he would write things down and then he'd send them to his friend back in LA, I think it was. And his friend faithfully took all of this together and he created this book called The Naked Lunch. It's an incredible read. But The Naked Lunch to him was that moment when you've got a piece of food on a fork and it's between the plate and the mouth. That's the naked lunch. It's at its most exposed right at that moment. And that, I think the tower captures that moment beautifully, those people falling. There's two people, isn't it, falling from the tower?
Yeah, King and the Queen.
Yeah, and even the amount of flames, there's flame plumes that are happening around that are captured too. They're significant, the number and everything like that. That is a snapshot. That is a Kodak moment right there. Yeah.
Yep.
So that's
pretty dramatic.
Yeah, it's the 0 point moment between life and death, certain death.
9/11.
Sorry?
9/11.
Yeah, could be. Man, didn't the world change after that?
Mm-hmm.
For the worse. You
And it
know,
was
it goes
was a
both
big
ways.
shock.
Yeah, yeah, it goes both ways. And one last card, the Knight of Air, the Knight of Swords. It sort of captures that moment right there too. The knight on his horse, the lightning striking the ocean there as well too. Anybody want to give us some insight on the Knight of Swords, the Knight of Air? What the card represents?
Well, that is the Libra sign at the bottom, so that's going to suggest balance. And air suggests communication. So the knight on the horse, I don't know, he doesn't look very balanced. I mean, I guess he does look balanced. It looks like he's about to throw something, but maybe he's getting ready, obviously, to go into battle. Um, and maybe that can relate back to the fool. You know, the fool obviously doesn't have his whole get up on. He's kind of going out there just as he is, but the knight looks like he's ready for battle. But it looks like he's starting. You know, it looks like he's going
Yeah,
into battle. He's at the beginning. So
zero moment.
a zero moment.
Yeah, exactly, the zero moment. And in a way, it's that the precariousness of that pose, but that armor, the sword and the lightning at the same time. It's like a moment frozen between recklessness and restraint, right at the same time. Control and a complete lack of control, you know, in the pursuit of something else. I like your parallel with the Fool, because in a way, it feels like if we were looking at the story of the Fool unfolding, this is about 8 or 9 chapters along. You know, the Fool has become a knight somewhere along in his journey and things like that. He's managed to find a horse somewhere. You know, everything's white. He represents something, I guess, even if it's just courage or just bravery. He could either be Sir Galahad or Don Quixote. He could be either one of those two. But right in that moment when that's taken too, it's still the same Fool, but those opposites are starting to separate now and move in 2 different directions. You know what I mean? He's becoming, instead of just some random kid standing on a hill looking off that no one gives a shit about because nobody knows him, and all of that sort of stuff, he's becoming a character now. He's becoming a player, but he's still on that Fool's journey. You know, that's what it feels like to me.
He is. He's just he's better prepared at this point.
Yeah.
He's picked up some knowledge. That's what Libra also indicates to me. He's pretty knowledgeable. He's a pretty smart guy in this scenario.
Yeah. But then the lightning coming from that sword, I mean, there's nothing more reckless and unpredictable than lightning at the same time. You know, we talk about the magician in a lot of ways as, you know, he's wielding this power, but he doesn't really understand the power. You know, he's just in love with the effect of the power, you know, and in a way, it's like a more destructive application of that same principle. You know, it's like, and the sword represents the intellect. The whole sword's arcana is the intellectual journey in a lot of ways. So he's at that part of his journey where it's a lot more refined than it's ever been, but he still doesn't control it, you know. And maybe in a way it speaks to the impetuous of youth as well. He's still young. Obviously doesn't have a mortgage. That's not a person with a mortgage.
No, he's very reckless.
No.
He doesn't have a family or no
Still
children
full of
either
himself. Yeah.
yeah.
He was still at the club 2 o'clock in the morning before, you know, wasn't he?
Before he signed up. Yeah. Before work, yes.
Yeah. Staggered in, put his armor on, got out there, got on his horse.
Got a sword. Yep.
That's it. Found his second wind, and he's away.
Well, looking at that, I'm seeing, you know, the storm and the, you know, which could represent pretty chaotic atmosphere, and you know, he said the sword represents the intellect. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
And so it's like he's learned how to wield the power of the wield his power within the chaos.
Yeah.
Yes. That's a very good interpretation.
And so
I do see that.
The environment hasn't necessarily changed in that, you know, it's still the unknown. He's still entering into the unknown right there. But he's drawing on his inner power, and he's using what's around him, because, you know, the sword is hitting off that that lightning strike. And so he's using what's in his environment. So he's, you know, he's creating that inner power, which obviously as the Fool, you know, he's just following that inner knowing, but he's got to the point there where he's developed that into an internal power.
Yeah. Still doesn't control it, still doesn't understand the nuts and bolts of it, but he's wielding it effectively, and he's you know, and he's using it as part of his world. He's not at the stage of the magician. I think the magician's got that mudra, you know, the arm up and the arm down at the same time, as above, so below. They at least understands he's a conduit. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's still not
so
quite
there's
there
still
yet.
chaos there.
Yeah.
As opposed to that, but maybe that's more powerful, is being able to move with the chaos and wield it, you know, without controlling it. It's just be a part of it and use what you can use out of it.
He becomes the 0 point. He's the harbinger of, you know, like again too, the magician is more polished. He's moved on from that 0 point and he's become what he is now. You know, he's become a conduit, a conscious conduit, even though he's not necessarily 100% conscious of what he's conducting, you know, of the energy that he's wielding and things like this. This guy's still reckless and out there. You know what I mean? And you know, it's these extremes all happening at the same time. You know, alarm bells going off in some ways, but, you know, there still seems to be some volition and a path attached to it too, you know. Gloriously imbalanced.
Still giving it his all, though. He's still out there.
I remember those days. Just like they were yesterday.
Were they yesterday?
Yeah, well, you're not very nice. Back when noodles were $15, not $30.
Yeah, yesterday when we were in our MG speeding down the highway.
Yeah. Ooh, I feel a book here. I can feel a book waiting to be written. do tell me more.
I remember when I was learning the tarot, we used to say, the teacher would say, the Knight of Swords is advising the tower is coming, or, you know, because he would be the emissary of the king and the queen in the tower, and he would rush back to the king and the queen and says, the red coats are coming, or whatever. You know, the enemy camp is, and so once the sword goes up, it's charge.
Yeah.
So, when we're speaking about love readings, this is a card that I love to get it because I just trash him totally.
Very cool. Okay, so that's a look at Uranus and the tarot. You know, there's been some really revealing insights there. Okay.
Dramatic.
So Uranus in a sign. Uranus is often a harbinger of sudden, unexpected change, and we've talked about that. You know what I mean? And a lot of the time too, it's not change that comes with its own ideology or creed. It's just change for the sake of change. It's completely uncontrolled change. It's unpredictable change and things like that. It's upheaval. You know what I mean? Like that tower card's a perfect example of that. We understand the physics of the explosion and the gravity of the falling, but that moment that captures them at snapshots the terror and the uncertainty of the people falling from the tower at the same time. It's a pretty extreme example of that. You know, we experience that in different ways. And some of us live for that moment, you know, that falling. Some of us are waiting for it all the time. I know me, myself, generally I feel better when things are a bit out of control. It's like my brain lights up, parts of my brain. It's generally the chaos that's better for me than the peacetime. The peacetime kills me slowly.
Yes, but you're Aquarius.
Yeah, I'm a problem solver, I think too. You know, when something happens, I'm generally the one who can stay calm and can navigate people through stuff. It's when it's calm all the time, I don't know what to do. You know, other than do what most Aquarians do, is just create chaos, I guess. But
I think
become the
Taurus
island of
must be having
reality
a
in the
really
ocean of
hard time.
diarrhea. So, yeah. Sorry, what was that, Antoinette?
I was, I was saying that Taurus is probably having a really hard time, but that comment just made me laugh. Because I thought of the tower.
So sudden, unexpected change. That's something to look for when you see Uranus in a particular sign. It can also show where inside innovation and creativity happens. That number one that follows the number zero. You know what I mean? That's when that whole process, when all the lights go back on and the machine starts the whole reboot process and things like that. That's associated with Uranus too. And for most people who love the planet Uranus, that's the narcotic moment there. That's when all the endorphins in the centers of the brain are triggering. You know, after that, shatterings happen, and you know, the more I read that, the more I realize that's probably me. You know, like when there's chaos and there's something needs to be done and people need to be go through, and you feel that eerie calm that happens after that. I remember when I was young, we used to get into a lot of trouble. We used to get into fights and stuff like that, and I used to always be really, really calm in those situations. And then when it was over, then the adrenaline would hit. It all come after. You know what I mean? So I think that's the narcotic moment for followers of the planet Uranus. Has anybody else got a reflex like that or something else like that besides Michaelin?
Yeah. I was thinking of the song. Do you guys remember that song? I think it was back from the 90s. I'm only happy when it rains. Have you heard that
Garbage.
song?
Yeah.
Yes, that's the one. Yeah, that's what I'm reminded of.
Yeah.
And yes, that's me.
I'm only happy when it's complicated.
Fortunately, it's always complicated. So. Yeah, I don't want it to be too easy. It's boring.
It's a bit of pushback, hey? Yeah.
Yep. But I have Uranus in the
Reminded
first
of
house.
that
In your
song.
first house.
First house at 2 degrees of Scorpio, right next to the ascendant. Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what were you saying, Antoinette?
I just remember that song by Prince that said, "Let's go crazy."
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's another good one.
The rhythm and the pumping and the music is like, and the guitar, you know, it kind of shakes up the norm.
It does. Yeah, it was a bit of an explosion. He used a lot of that actually as well. It was I remember when I was young, we used to have what was it? Some Solid Gold. You remember Solid Gold, that TV series back in the day, back when Marilyn McCoo was the host with, I can't remember who it was. And I remember watching it. I was in high school at the time it was on, and then Prince came out with Little Red Corvette. And I was sitting at home, and my mum was on the sofa too, and we were looking, and she looked at Prince, and it was right at that moment that she decided she needed to explain homosexuality to me. You know, that there were people out there in the world who are not like you or me, or, you know, and they think differently and all this. This is when she saw Prince, you know, doing his Little Red Corvette dance on stage. You know, just memories.
Which is
memories.
hilarious because that song is actually not, it's about a heterosexual, you know, relationship and a woman that has a lot of Trojans in her pocket.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's about a woman.
So,
right.
Raspberry beret too, and that was a euphemism, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, you know all of them. You know all of them.
I was a big Prince fan. I loved a lot of his stuff, you know.
Oh, I love Prince too. Yes.
Yeah.
I love
Prince.
He was a
Everybody
Gemini.
had their favorite black artist back then. You know, mine was definitely Prince.
Well, actually, Michael Jackson was my favorite when I was younger. But Prince was a close second, but I love Michael Jackson. Like, totally.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up with Michael Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
You know, practicing all the moves and you knew all the dances.
I love.
That was
You're
before
not from the highway, down the highway in the MG, and after that, yeah. So, which brings us to our next point, nonconformity. So, you know, Prince is all of these three things too, I think. You know, he's really probably an ambassador for Uranus in a lot of ways. Yeah.
His Uranus is in Leo, and I've just got his chart right here. And
Really?
so, and yours is too, isn't it, Antoinette? Your Uranus is in
Yes.
Leo. He also has a Scorpio, I want to say moon in Pisces, and his rising sign is Scorpio, Antoinette.
Okay. All right,
So,
Prince. Yeah,
yeah.
I hear you.
He's the real deal.
Intense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for real, definitely.
Aren't we dead naming him? He's Squiggle now, isn't he? Whatever that little symbol thing was.
Well,
Yeah.
it's just the artist formerly known as Prince. Is what you
Formerly
call
known as Prince. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that had something to do with the record company and the
Oh,
deal and everything.
he
And
sold the rights to the name Prince and everything that came with it. It was a genius move. Yeah, and then formed the new power generation, etc., and became Squiggle symbol and rebranded. Yeah.
that was
Very
wild.
Uranian. Very
Was, wasn't it?
Uranian.
Yeah, he was the Uranian ambassador for the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The quantum
Cool
leap.
dude.
This can represent Uranus in a sign too, where we jump all of a sudden from one thought form to something completely different. Computers are an example. When we go back in history, almost everything human beings ever made was a testimony to us being bipeds of 2 hands, 2 feet, a body built the way it is with eyes at the front of our body. Every tool we ever created was a critique of form. It had a utility that pointed back to the way we were built. The computer was the first real massive deviation from that model. You know what I mean? Suddenly you needed a keyboard to activate it and a mouse to move an object around on the page and things like that. It was completely text driven in the beginning and just continues to be more alien and more out there as it goes. It was one of the first big radical departures from us as a bipedal human being. And look at everything that happened as a result of that. It's essentially become a new limb or a new brain, a new entity unto itself, almost a new life form, and it's rapidly evolving into that as we go on. A lot of people say it's probably a real clear example of Roswell technology, that come from a different place, that functions in a completely different way and has created a quantum leap for humanity. We're now moving in a completely different trajectory at a faster rate than we ever were before. And that's all Uranian. All of that is Uranian, the quantum leap. Yeah, everybody's familiar with that term, quantum leap. It's just a leap from one state of consciousness to a sudden explosion in a completely different direction that we weren't in before. It sweeps everything up with it when it goes. Yeah.
Mhm.
Spiritual awakening. It can be a center where spiritual awakening happens, but it's not the touchy-feely God vibes that a lot of us feel that come after that. Again, too, that starts from the number one and moves onwards. It's going to be that zero moment, right when we feel epiphany, for example, and our brain gets a hard reset, or our soul gets a hard reset, and suddenly all these other options are available. You know what I mean? It can be the person who suddenly discovers God. And has that spiritual awakening all of a sudden. For me, even little things, like I remember the moment that I really got my mind around the fact that the universe is infinite. I mean, really infinite, not just theoretically infinite. It's like that moment after you've had a major accident where you realize you could have died and you, for the first time, realize that you're mortal. And I think that epiphany happened for me at the same time as a result of an accident that I had. And I struggled for a while, but then when I realized the universe is truly infinite, that calmed me right down. And that told me that there is a God. I don't have to understand him or it or whatever it is or anything like that. But as long as the universe is infinite and cyclic and moving and expanding, goes infinitely in every direction, which means that every possibility is available. That something so powerful is out there that it's not even worth beginning to try and wrap your mind around it. Just feel comforted by it. And that's what that did for me. That was an epiphany that I had that moved me out of that. I had a car accident, put me in a real dark space for about 6 months. And it was that moment, that realization that lifted me out of that. Is anybody else able to relate to something like that? Generally, it's at that catastrophic moment. Like they say, God lives in prison. I think so many people find God in prison.
Sometimes it can be a rude awakening.
Yeah, sometimes it has to be, though.
Yeah, like grabbing somebody by the shoulders and saying, "Wake up."
Yeah.
You know, definitely it's a wake up
Or it
to,
rolls over the top of you. We talked about this in Pluto moving into Aquarius. And that word awakening kept coming up again and again and again.
yes,
And for
yes.
a lot of people, awakening is a luxury that we come to in our own time. For a lot of people, it's not. It's sudden and it's rude
No,
and it's even violent when it happens,
that's it,
you know. But it
right.
wakes us the
And
hell
it
up.
doesn't, yeah, and it's not only Uranus, you know, it
Yeah,
can be Neptune or it can be Pluto. It has to do with the outer planets
yeah,
when they're touching a sensitive point in your chart.
yes, yeah. It's like a conspiracy of planets moving on. And we talked about this. I think we said if you got run over by a bus, then if it was your own dumb fault, then that's karma and that's Saturn. If you didn't see it coming and it kills you, it's probably Pluto. Either way, the bus is Uranus, you know?
Ah, you don't see it coming.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
it. Yeah, you wouldn't see it coming. It was
It's
sudden and
unexpected.
unexpected. That's for sure. That's
Yes.
for sure. You know, so, and that for me is a nice analogy to understand those outer planets. And when you look at it that way, then Uranus is definitely the third malefic. Yeah, yeah. Independence and freedom. So people who naturally, who aren't Sagittarians, who naturally need independence and freedom and things like that, and to, you know, not be constrained and tied down, are probably responding to a very strong Uranus on their chart, or unconventional, you know, and that sort of thing too. So that's which is the next point, unconventional thinkers too. That all sort of ties up in a nice little bow there. And
I
these are all
love how
different
we
ways.
jumped over.
Sorry?
I love how we jumped over independence and freedom. You're Aquarius. I noticed that.
You might be reading too much into it. It just she's being Uranus at the moment. She's just agitating the group.
I see
Oh,
you.
she's back.
Unconventional thinking.
So glad to
I
see
have
you
a
healthy
brother
and
who is
better.
Aquarius.
Yeah.
My brother was Aquarius, and he was very unconventional in his thoughts and in his freedom
Yeah.
and everything.
Well, that's yeah. Still somehow you're the black sheep. Yeah.
Yes,
She's a
yes.
Scorpio. She's got that Scorpio rising. So
Yeah.
and that Pisces. Yeah. So that's
But
why.
so do you. Don't you
Well,
have? I
well,
know.
I'm a 25-degree Libra rising, and Scorpio is so almost a
Oh,
Scorpio rising.
all right. You
Almost.
got you. Yeah, you're
So
stable.
she's
You're
capable
stable.
of agitating both sides at the same time. That's what she's saying.
Okay.
I can do
I
it
know
with
you have
balance.
Aquarius in the fourth house, so
Correct. Hmm.
I thought you were a Scorpio rising too, but not necessarily.
Hmm.
Almost, not quite.
I could have been a Libra rising too. Maybe I am. I wasn't sure.
You know, you were very close because you're 1 degree Scorpio, and your birth time you said was so I don't know, is that your exact birth
Like
time or
10.
yeah,
Yeah,
10
I
at
don't
10
know if it's
o'clock?
10:05 or
Okay.
9:55. My mother kept saying 10, so I guess. But you see, when it comes out at 10, everything is
Hmm.
dark. It's like the sun is
Hmm.
at that degree and Pluto is at that degree. So I guess it was 10 o'clock.
She could have been,
Yeah,
but
I
she
know it
turned
has to
around
be
and
the
went back.
Scorpio rising. Oh boy.
I like
remember
Scorpios.
some women, when they're pregnant, they're gonna have the child, they change the date or have a C-section so that the child is
It's
not
not an
born with a
Aries.
Scorpio, right?
Yeah.
As if you could trick fate out of a Scorpio, right?
Yeah.
And that's where things between the mother and the child began to go wrong, you know. Because the child probably chose to come in as whatever, you know. So who can say?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Which brings us to our next point. It also on the chart rules for a sign, it can rule chaotic disruption in all its glorious forms. It can be somebody who is the chaos disruptor, a chaotic disruptor. It can be somebody who's constantly disrupted by chaos at the same time. You know what I mean? Knocked out of center continually, and things like that too. And that's probably the best and the worst thing about working with Uranus in the chart. You can't just look at it and figure it out. You know, I mean, we throw these terms around like independence and innovation and rebellion, and things like that and stuff like that. But and like I said, the more I started going down this rabbit hole, the more interesting it got, because at the end of the day, it just represents that moment where all possibilities are on the table, and that's so impersonal when it happens. It's really about a moment, and things like that too. So it's hard to assign that as a personality trait on a chart. You know what I'm saying? I think if you live in a state of constant chaotic disruption, then you're probably going to be chaotic and disruptive. You know what I mean? So it's a chicken and the egg argument. You know, like Morticia Adams says, what's normal for the spider is chaos for the fly. When somebody else is looking at from the outside in at that person, well, of course they look like an agitator. Of course they look like a troublemaker. You know, at school, of course they're not going to latch on to the status quo and follow what everybody else is thinking. Of course they're going to challenge you all the time and things like that. Their natural state is your unnatural state. You know what I mean? So if you're going to work with Uranus on a chart in a sign, I think the whole process starts with detective work and finding out how that agitator on your chart has been expressing, and whether you've jumped in as a passenger in the car with that agitator, whether you're the driver of that car, or whether that car just keeps running you over and then circling around and then running you over again, you know, and you're standing there, you're expecting it to come from this direction, and it comes from the other direction, and things like that.
Because we can't control it because it's an outer planet. So
No.
it's generational. It's just that,
Yeah.
you know, you're born in the times when X, X, Y, Z.
Yeah,
So,
and we can't see it coming too. You know, it's going in the opposite direction. All the planets are on this plane, you know, while Uranus is on a tilt. You know what I mean?
Never.
So you never see it coming when it comes, you know? There's some people learn to roll with those punches. Some people become the punches, you know? I always cringe when I hear someone say, I am the storm. It just seems like it's so full of hubris and bullshit and stuff like that. But you know, I love the way Michael is laughing at the moment, you know what I mean? Yeah,
Well, I hear
you're
people
just
say
generally
that,
looking
and
at
I'm
it, you're
like,
thinking, no, you're not. And it's about,
Yeah.
so, but, you know, if
Unless
somebody,
the Mike Tyson.
well, yeah, well, that's right. Don't
He's an
unpack
exception.
that. Not after the Jake Paul fight. Let's not go there.
It wasn't a fight. That was a show. That was
Have
not
some
a fight, you
respect.
Yeah,
guys.
have some respect. But
You know, it's interesting.
sorry,
It
Ryan.
was interesting, but it was not
Yeah.
a fight.
But Rowan,
Well, I was thinking the quantum leap part. Did you ever see the show Quantum Leap?
Yes.
Yes.
It
Wasn't
almost
it
sounds
great?
like you're describing it.
All right. That was a great show. Yes.
It was a
Yeah.
great show.
Yeah,
They
you had
tried
the
to reboot
electricity
it and it didn't
man
work.
and-
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
They tried to reboot it as well. There was a remake of it and it just died after a season. I couldn't capture it.
It was kind of interesting because the electricity came in and all of a sudden he was zapped to a place he didn't know and he had to completely redo his thoughts.
Yeah.
And
Figure
yeah,
out
and then
who
he
he
was righting
was.
the wrongs. And
Yeah.
it just kind of felt like what you're talking about.
Wasn't the end of every episode that zero moment? Bang, he was suddenly somebody else.
Exactly.
You know, and he
Yes,
was like, well, what the
exactly.
hell? And he was in a situation and then it ended. And that was your hook to make you watch the next one, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a great show. Really, really good. Who was it? Scott Bakula and Dean Stockwell? Yeah. They
That's
were
right.
really,
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that show.
They're both kind of freaks, aren't they? Especially Dean Stockwell. Yeah.
Yeah.
Done some good stuff. He does a lot of stuff with David Lynch. I don't know anybody who likes his movies. Yeah.
you guys remember a lot of things, eh? Because Uranus is long-term memory as well. So
Perfectly phrased. Absolutely right. Yeah. Which somehow seems counterintuitive when you weigh up everything else. But then it rules storage. The brain is electricity. It's a piece of fat suspended and floating in an amniotic fluid that's conducting tremendous amounts of lightning at a given time. You know, that's probably the most unromantic Aquarian way of breaking the brain down, but that's really what it is. You know.
Yeah, pretty much.
it's the
So
universal
believe that-
brain.
Yeah, to believe that's driving everything, that there's not a soul, seems a bit more of a stretch to me. That's the actual reality than, you know, there's nothing bigger than that. So analyze Uranus's role, which we've done, synthesize the information, which through life and experience we've all done. The dignity in the sign or house modality is important as well, and we've already unpacked that. We've had a look at that. We're seeing exaltation, we're seeing domicile, all of that sort of stuff coming up. So yeah, that's definitely important too. And then we look at aspects to other planets, like Sandra was talking about. I think you said you have 12th house stuff.
Harmonious. Yeah, so it's in harmony with my Jupiter in Gemini, my first house, and my Mars in where it is in my 12th house. And I don't have any challenging aspects to my Uranus.
In a way, if you don't like change, then that Jupiter in Gemini is definitely going to be a challenging aspect, because that's more unpredictability on a grander scale in a chaotic sign, isn't it? That's more unpredictability, those two together. Yeah.
I'm
Jupiter's a big
comfortable
disruptor.
in the unknown. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
I am the fool.
Yeah, she is the storm. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. You're the fool.
And the fool, the stormy fool.
Well, I am a Leo.
Or the foolish storm, one of the two. And we look at the house that Saturn crept in there. How Uranian was that? That was unexpected. Bloody Uranus. Yeah. So, and we just look at the house that Uranus occupies as well, that it rules on the chart, on the natal chart. Working with aspects, which we're all familiar with. Uranus conjunction is transformation from fusion. It's two objects fusing together. It's a fusion process. You know, we're on the brink of fusion energy. I remember I was in Indonesia when they cracked it. It was the first time. It's like a holy grail of energy science. And we're going into a phase. I've got a cousin in New Zealand right now who's on the bleeding edge over there, bringing in fusion, stable fusion energy and stuff like that too. And that's like a rapid oscillation of energy between two objects happening at high speed all the time, an accelerated but stable process. And that's a Uranus conjunction. So it's like an electrical current that's cycling at incredible speed, oscillating. When Uranus sextiles another planet on the chart, it's unique growth opportunities. Yeah, and generally people who've got those placements on their chart. You know, it's one of those things you keep your ears and your eyes open for, because they come from unexpected directions and things like that. It's good entrepreneur energy. Person who sees something happen and realizes, gee, I could monetize that, or I could make a career off that, or I could create a product that anticipates that need. Somebody who's always on the pulse of what's about to change, and they're willing to do that work and go through that whole process of manifesting that, which is a really difficult thing to do often with Uranus energy, because that moment comes and it goes. You've got to be ready to go straight away. It's like all of those factories in Thailand and China that whenever there's a craze, they all immediately pick it up, reverse engineer it, and start mass producing things to meet that market expectation out there. You know, that's a Uranus sextile placement right there. When Uranus trines something, it's innovative creativity. That flow comes easily. That electricity is coming in and it's vitalizing. It's charging everything that's going through there. So if you've got, and it comes easily, you don't have to fight for it. It's not going to come and go. It's a constant flow of energy and electricity that's flowing into that center all the time. It's like a dedicated part of the brain where the enigmatic energy is just, there's a constant storm activity there creating ripple effects through everything else. Probably Elon Musk, I don't know, someone like that.
Yeah.
Whatever he may be. Yeah. Harnessing Uranus. Instincts and intellect. That's to activate your instincts and your intellect. And when I talk about instincts, I'm not talking about your emotional instincts. Sometimes there are mental instincts as well, what your mind wants to do in a given situation. And sometimes it can be the calm, like I was talking about. Generally, when there's chaos around some people, there's always that person who somehow manages, when they close their eyes and they center themselves, they know what to do. And it comes to them like an epiphany, like a lightning bolt and stuff like that. Yeah, that's a different kind of instinctive energy. And sometimes it just comes from being centered and still. For many people, that's probably coming in the form of meditation, insight, and things like that. You're inviting new ideas from outside yourself to come in and inhabit your mental space, and you're allowing yourself to reflect on them without bias. So Uranus, that's Uranus at play when that's happening. For some,
Yeah, when I hear people, sorry.
No, go, absolutely.
No, I was saying some people speak about getting intuitive hits, and I always
Yeah.
imagine that as Uranus, when you least expect it, you get a download. You know, you
Yeah.
just know something, and you say, "Oh my God, okay."
Yeah. Out of the box thinkers always seem to come up with unexpected solutions to problems. You know what I mean? Or they look at problems in a completely different way, and they find
Out the
solutions
box.
that nobody. Yeah, yeah. And sometimes the less convoluted they are, what is it? Occam's razor. The simplest solution is always the best one, and quite often that's the case with Uranus. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the instinctive one, that's most efficient. Bill Gates said he puts high value on high functioning lazy people, because lazy people will always find the easiest solution, and which is often the most efficient one. You know what I mean? As long as it ticks all the boxes and does everything that the solution is supposed to do, then that's the best way to go. It's got the least resistance. And you know what I mean? And it's come from an instinctive space, which means there's an organic element to it somehow. You know,
So
even if
there's
it comes
something
over.
good in that.
Yeah, yeah. And that comes with that don't plan, act. That's the next thing as well. Sometimes, you know, when you're sitting there, when you're getting weighed under a problem, sometimes just acting is the best step forward when you're stuck. And this is probably best advice to Librans. You know what I mean? Who get so overwhelmed by all the information coming in and by the opposites and things like that. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just act, because if nothing else, the act will shake up the paradigm that you've got right now. That holding pattern will move you out of it and it will disrupt it. And sometimes just enough disruption will reveal a solution. And quite often that solution is a simple one. Yeah. So
Bill Gates actually has Uranus in the first house, by the way.
okay, there we go. Yeah, that makes sense.
Like you.
Yeah. You're becoming that guy that Joe Rogan has on his podcast. He says, I'm going to start saying, Michael, can you bring that up?
Well, actually, I found that out because earlier when I was looking into Uranus before our meeting tonight, I was just curious. I wanted to see
Cool.
who else had it in the first house. And Bill Gates was one of the ones, Johnny Depp, Leonardo DiCaprio, Nicki Minaj. But Bill Gates was one of the ones. So you brought him up. So I just thought that was interesting. So I wanted to make
Awesome.
sure everybody knows.
Yeah, cool. Focus on your individuality. And this is the hardest one for a lot of people, unless you've got really powerful Uranus on your chart, and then it's the easiest thing to do in the world. Sometimes it's you know what I mean? Quite often, the worst thing a person can do is know in their mind that something's wrong and still be complicit anyway, and be afraid to stand out. Or sometimes you might have a solution in mind, but you don't act, you don't open your mouth, and so you just let things keep going on the way they're going. I remember that story in Canada when all those Chinese tourists went up to some national park up there, and one woman on the bus had changed her clothes during the day, and another person couldn't tell who she was, but didn't see the person who was wearing her clothes before on the bus, and figured that person had been left behind in the park, that they were lost. So not only did all these other people go out to look for this person, but the woman who they were looking for was also part of the search party going out. She was just wearing different clothes, and they didn't find out till like 2 or 3 in the morning that she had been there right next to them all that time looking for herself with them. So sometimes just focus on your individuality and just, you know what I mean, and assert yourself. Sometimes that's the deal, the stalemate breaker for Uranus too, if you're struggling with that pattern, is to latch onto your individuality and move with it, instinctively act with it and go forward. Create just to be creative. Sometimes, and this is tough advice from some parents, especially if you were creative when a kid. Some of us have had parents that have said, well, why are you doing that? That's a waste of time. That's not going to get you a job, and things like that too. Creation for the sake of being creative is probably one of the purest mental processes that you can do. And that is an exploration of that 0 point potential. You know what I mean? And the more familiar some people are with that, the greater their capabilities are. For many people, that's the difference between somebody who's destined to work for other people and somebody who's destined to create something new that's going to create work opportunities for other people, if we're purely looking at it from an employment point of view. And finally, watch for shadows. Sometimes too, when you're working with Uranian energy too, those unexpected things that come, they create shadows. Sometimes they are the shadows. Sometimes they are the storm too. I think, and quite often too, it's an interesting juxtaposition. I think the more you chase the rabbit down the rabbit hole, the further away you get from yourself too. And I think sometimes exploring those parts of yourself too, you should, depending on the client, sometimes I think you need to look at the placements that are surrounding Uranus on the chart too, and controlling and directing it too, and the thought forms they're creating. And things like that. And I think that's something to be aware of with Uranian energy. Sometimes those insights, those instincts and intellectual epiphanies that we get, they're not always coming from a good place too. So I think, I guess what I'm saying is always be objective too when people are working with Uranian energy as well, if that makes sense. I don't know if anybody's ever had an example of that. For example, I think not John Wayne Gacy, Sam Berkowitz, the son of Sam Murderer, the dog next door was telling him to kill people. That's probably a really extreme example. But you know what I mean? Watch for shadows. Just because that information is coming in doesn't mean it's healthy, doesn't mean it's good, doesn't mean you should act on it and things like that too. There should be some degree of impulse
real
control.
shadows.
Yeah, well, that's, like I said, that's an extreme example as well too. But even then, sometimes, you know, there's people right now who's saying they're talking their truth, when really at the end of the day, all they're doing is blurting out the first rude thing that comes into their head. That as well is another example of how that can be. Watch for shadows, you know. For me,
or
yeah,
shadow work.
yeah, we do, you know, for doing shadow work as well. If I was doing shadow work, I probably wouldn't be using Uranus as a conduit to do it. I might use an app or technology that it creates, but I wouldn't be using Uranus to do it. It's too unpredictable. Uranus doesn't care about you, you know, at the end of the day.
No. But I was listening to something yesterday, and you know, they said with all this technology that's coming in and the aliens, you know, look, you guys were talking about, like, you might see things out the corner of your eye. You may see a shadow.
Yeah.
You know, and it's preparing us for what is to come, because we're going to have apparitions, they're saying, and people have already had sightings in the United States of, you know, ships.
Yeah.
So it could be that shadow too.
You know, the crazy thing about it too is at the end of the day, most people are reasonable and most people are kind to some degree, and most people don't want to hurt other people. You know, and and the people you meet every day, to some greater or lesser degree, are on that sliding scale of kindness. Some are more about themselves than others. Some are more about others than themselves and things like that. But through technology, we're constantly exposed to the worst of the human condition. You know what I mean? We're constantly exposed to forms of. There was a poll that was taken after George Floyd lost his life, and they were asking people how often they thought that these acts of violence were happening, perpetrated by police in America. And they found that most Republicans, depending on their political persuasion, affected their answer drastically. They found that when they asked people who were leading off to the right, when they got to the extreme right, they pretty much thought those stories were fabricated. They didn't happen at all, and they were always extenuating circumstances. They were blown out of proportion. But as they got further and further into the left, people roughly around the middle left thought that around 100 people were being killed per year by police in different states for different reasons. And then when they got up to the far end of the spectrum, some people were thinking up to 10,000 deaths were happening in America every year caused by police. The truth is, on average, I think the stats say that on average, 10 people are killed by police every year. 10 black people are killed by police every year across America. That's the middle line. But because of these constant messages that are being bombarded out there all the time by the press, who are invested in that story taking hold and getting out there, people's perception of the scale of the problem is drastically different from each end of the spectrum. You know, so I guess
the ones we hear about anyway, because
yeah,
you can't even count on the news.
Yeah. So, you know, all this Uranian energy out there has a tend to conflate, infect, or even distort
And
the
shock.
reality of,
Yes.
yeah, and shock, you know. Well, hell, a lot of the media now is poised for shock. Shock is their moneymaker,
Yeah.
you know. So again, to watch for shadows. They can come from any direction, you know, when you're working with your
Well,
own
you would
energy.
probably include confirmation bias then under
Yes.
that aspect,
Yeah,
because you are just
absolutely.
looking for what you already believe to be true, so you'll find it.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head with social media too, and fact checking these days too. Even when people are presented with overwhelming evidence, we were talking about this before, contrary to what they believe, they'll just cling harder to what they believe, you know, and then they'll go out and they'll find whatever shred of social media. It could be a meme, it could be a post by a vaguely influential person, you know, and they'll wave that in everybody's face and say, look, 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 you know, yeah. So
Because information used to be passed down, right, through word of mouth and from reliable sources. So you always
yeah,
knew the source of the information that you received.
yeah.
And, now it's by memes on social media. And people will fall out with their, nearest and dearest, who would have been those people passing it down originally, over a meme that, hasn't been like, that just confirms their bias, and therefore it's true whether it is or not. So, it's a bit of a chaotic world. It's a bit Uranian world that we're living in right now.
With the AI and everything, you don't know what to believe. You need to practice discernment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the worst thing is too, with social media, all those idiots are invited to the same table that you're sitting at. Everybody's there now. At the end of the day, I know how nasty that sounds, but at the end of the day, generally, if somebody was dumb, 20 or just misinformed or insane or whatever, 20, 30, 40 years ago, they went and did it over there. And if you weren't over there, you wouldn't know. But now there's actually whole groups of them, all together, all feeding each
So
other.
we know.
And then now they're turning up on your feed too, because you said something vaguely related to some
And you
stupid.
didn't know that you don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's the Dunning-Kruger effect, isn't it? You don't know what you don't know, so you think you know everything. There's a
But then
scientific term for it.
you have examples of Aboriginal cave paintings that depicted things that happened across the other side of the world, that they had, long before there was any such thing as internet, that they would have no possible way of knowing. And my understanding of the internet is just a replication of the inner communication capabilities that we actually have, and that we've lost connection with. And so I guess if, whoever's turning up at your table, it gives us an opportunity to go, right, that's coming into my awareness, it's coming into my attention. So there's something in me that's resonating with it. So how do I work with that so that that's no longer resonating and therefore no longer coming into my field? So maybe the internet is just this like massive opportunity to do a whole heap of shadow work, all in a really short space of time, because we've never had access to such an amazing amount of it in the past. And then once we've all gone through that, then there's no need for social media anymore.
That
Just
being
put a
said,
slightly
though, that being said, and getting back to the watch for shadows thing, just try Googling, did the Holocaust really happen? And see what sort of results you get. The people most
I know,
invested
I've
in
heard
proving that it
stories.
never happened will come right to the top of
Yeah.
your Google results.
Mm-hmm.
So
Scary,
that's,
isn't it?
yeah, that's it. They'll that's the information that'll come up right up the top of the search, because they're the most invested in making sure that their doctrine and their information is out there. So
Yes, so what I'm saying is
so it's
that
unreliable. Yeah.
we can have it, we can use it to work with our shadow and to bring us back like further into inner knowing, because it appears that we've lost all connection to that, which was what we lived by for such a long time. And so sometimes you need to completely swing the opposite way in order to understand what's missing. And you know, I think more and more the dead energy that comes from interacting with certain aspects of social media is, you know, it's being felt at this point, and people are potentially returning back to, you know, like we were talking about earlier, you know, that where there's so much truth available to you, how do you decide what's true without going inwards and actually feeling instinctively what is true for you? So maybe it returns us home eventually.
I think you're right, because truth on the internet has been privatized. So you need to go looking after your own truth now. You need to pursue that. You know what I mean?
And it's so much more blatant now, so much more obvious to so much more people, you know,
I think
not
that
just
process has
conspiracy
started,
theories and
but
that's
people
lies.
But for the last while, it's been emotional truth. People have been tuning into their emotional truth, and I think we're gradually moving higher and finer all the time, and we're pursuing that. Yeah, I think you would say. Yeah. Cool. Okay. And finally, manifesting Uranus. Wednesday, that's the higher Mercury day. That's the best day to manifest Uranian energy, hump day. So that's, you know, if you're trying to harness or bring more Uranian energy into your life, or at least wrangle and control it, that's the day to put your energy out there. We talk about a shrine or altar every time we do this as well, and this is what you can put on that altar. Anything that's electric blue, silver, or iridescent. You know, like those, you're seeing those iridescent cars now, they've got that sort of light hits them, they'll change color depending on whatever you're looking at. Any objects like that, they're things that will bring more Uranian energy into your household and into your life. Your metals are uranium. I do not recommend putting that on your altar. Or aluminium. You know, hey, but if you don't have a shrine, then maybe you can use a microwave. I don't know. Taking that into account. So anything aluminium as well will also bring in Uranian energy. Anything with a spiral shape, anything that conducts, is powered by or manipulates energy as well, is a great thing to put onto a shrine for Aquarius. And electricity. When I say Aquarius, sorry, I mean Uranus. Your birthstones are aquamarine, opal, and clear quartz. So if you've got any of that lying around the house and you want to work with that energy, then put some of that on your altar. And that'll get you some results. And your stars, your flowers are eucalyptus, and any flower that is star-shaped. Anything that's got a star shape on it, then put that on your altar. That'll bring in Uranus energy as well. Yeah. And that's us. That's everything. We covered quite a lot today.
Yes.
How did we go?
I've just realized that I'm living in a Uranus vortex. I'm
You've got all these
in a forest of eucalyptus trees, and we've got these tassel flower, which are like star-shaped flowers everywhere.
You're living next to a uranium mine or something like that. Yeah.
No, thankfully not.
Here's a star right there on the screen.
What's that?
The star.
Yeah, the modern astrology star. There you go, people. We've been well ahead of the curve this whole time. Yeah. I don't think that comes as any great surprise to anybody.
While we're here, while we're talking about it, modern astrology, star. It's like a flag.
Well, it is. It's our symbol, isn't it? Yeah.
Right.
That and the Chinese Communist Revolution as well, I suppose. Any final thoughts or anything anybody wants to add for today? We went through a lot. We covered a lot of territory, but like I said, I think when I was doing the research for this and getting everything together, it was a really good journey for me. And especially returning everything to zero, as close to zero as possible, and really defining what that quality is. That moment that Uranus is exact. It's especially powerful for this planet, I think, because everything else after that is either a structure collapsing or a new structure forming, you know? Yeah.
Is it direct now or retrograde?
I'm not sure, to be honest. When I say, and also, yeah.
Retrograde still.
Okay. Yeah.
It's 23 degrees in Taurus, squaring
Yeah.
my Uranus.
Well, there you go.
But it's my last Uranus square. It's my last Uranus square. After that, I'm free. I'm free. It's pure sextile.
Doesn't like being in Taurus, that's for sure. So it'd be nice when that moves on, won't it? Yeah. All right, cool. Well, thanks, guys. This is our last work group for the year. So, God, we've had a big year, hey? We've done a lot. Michael and I were talking about it yesterday. We've just done so much more than we thought we'd do. And we're really glad you guys have been part of it. So we're really looking forward to doing some real exciting stuff in 2025. We've already got ideas, and I know Michael and Sandra have been plotting as well, so they've got some stuff up there. So,
yeah, I've been reading stuff that they're going to be going off in all directions.
Michael keeps throwing me breadcrumbs and tidbits just to let me know that I should never get too comfortable, always be on the tips of my toes. So there's stuff going on the horizon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, guys, I'm going to stop recording. Look, if you're watching this on YouTube then and you're watching it live or whatever the case may be when it's come out, then have a great Christmas. Thanks for being a part of this year. And we've got new ideas and a whole lot of new things coming in 2025. I'm excited about it, and I'm hoping you're going to be there with us taking this journey too. This is Modern Astrology signing off for 2024.